It's been a long week in the newsroom. Scandal after scandal, and the extramarital affairs, things can get messy. So, unless you've been under a rock this week, you'll know exactly what I mean. Both of the biggest political players in Singapore were affected, and the fallout has been stunning. One affair led to the Speaker of Parliament and a fellow People's Action Party MP to resign from politics, and this was announced by none other than the Prime Minister himself. Later, the leader of the opposition announced that one of the Workers' Party MPs had resigned, along with a senior member of their team. What is going on? You might be asking. Well, let's get to the point with Deputy News Editor Grace Ho. Grace, let's talk about the latest affair first, involving WP's Leon Pereira and Nicole Seah. What stands out for you in how the matter was handled by the party?
Well, first of all, can I just say how stunned many of us were when we first saw that grainy footage of Mr. Pereira and Ms. Seah supposedly acting inappropriately that was circulating online. And it sparked a flurry of attempts to figure out which restaurant they were at, and memes had been flying around. The WP took some time to respond, but in all fairness, it wasn't that long. It's about a 48-hour news cycle. So initially, there was a very quick holding statement, and the media was aware that their Central Executive Committee, which is essentially the top decision-making body, was meeting over Monday and Tuesday night, presumably to thresh out this matter. And then on Wednesday afternoon, it held the press conference. But speed is one thing. So what's not so clear to me is why, after WP Chief Pritam Singh had been informed of the matter by Leon's driver around late 2020 or early 2021, he asked Mr. Pereira, and when Mr. Pereira denied it, he didn't probe further. Obviously, the question, following on from that is why not corroborate with other sources other than Mr. Pereira and Ms. Seah, given that the two of them are the involved parties? So was the manner of handling perhaps too expedient?
Grace, both Mr. Pereira and Ms. Seah have resigned. WP has also briefly laid out plans as to what the other alternate GRC members will do to fill in the space left by Mr. Pereira's departure. What else is left unanswered?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, the overarching question is why was it treated as an open and shut case from the start? Would any action have been taken against the both of them had they decided to come clean earlier, in 2021, for example? Would they have been asked to resign then or given a second chance? Did the two of them explain why they lied at first? And when did the relationship between them end, and what prompted it to end? And of course, going back to that video, when was the video taken and by whom? And why was it released only now, if presuming it wasn't taken by Leon's driver?
So, earlier in the week, there was also a similar affair in the PAP. What differences do you see in the way the PAP handled the issue?
I think one significant difference is in how the parties describe the thinking behind their approach. So in the PAP's case, Prime Minister Lee, in his press conference, stressed 2 points. First, it was the recalcitrance of Mr. Tan Chuan Jin and Ms. Cheng Li Hui that forced his hand. Okay? And what we know is that they had been counseled to end the relationship. Mr. Tan said he would break it off, but later the Prime Minister uncovered information that was to the contrary. And second, the fact that in the PAP's case, one was a speaker presiding over Parliament and another was an MP, the member of that very house. So as the Prime Minister said, it's simply inappropriate to have, the speaker having a relationship with one of the MPs. It's just not acceptable. In the WP's case, Mr. Pritam Singh seemed to be saying that it was the fact that Leon and Nicole lied to him and the other leaders, which contravened the Workers' Party's constitution that requires candidates to be honest and frank in their dealings, both with their colleagues and with the public. So it was the untruthfulness rather than the affair itself that was considered unacceptable to the WP. And that's the qualitative difference compared with the PAP, because what the PAP did this time round was actually consistent with past cases like Mr. Michael Palmer and Mr. David Ong. Basically, once an extramarital affair was uncovered, that's it. Why? Because the baseline expectation is that PAP MPs must be irreproachable in their personal conduct, whether in Parliament or in their personal lives. But If I can point out just one similarity, it wasn't really a one strike and you're out situation for both the political parties. In fact, you get the sense that had the relationships ended when they were first uncovered, they might have actually been given a second chance. And I'm also wondering, is this approach reflective of changing mores in Singapore society? Because in the past, it would have been just that's it, you're out. Um, and yes, I mean, some have said that both political parties seem to delay letting the news, go out into the public. But honestly, I mean, between ourselves, when it comes to personal relationships, it can be a fuzzy gray area compared to an outright case of, say, corruption.
With the two major political parties here embroiled in all these recent scandals, what impact do you think they would have on the dynamics in Parliament and the political landscape in Singapore?
I don't think the presence of the series of scandals is directly correlated with what will happen in Parliament. There have obviously been some operational changes, like Ms. Jessica Tan stepping in as acting speaker. But if we're talking about the temperature of Parliament debates, it's already been going up since the live streaming of these debates, and since there was a stronger sort of post-GE 2020 opposition presence, in the House. In terms of the political landscape, both parties have already made known that they have covering arrangements. But definitely in the short term, both sides will come under pressure, especially in the case of WP, which is an opposition party. It has to work even harder to rebuild trust and to wrest seats from the People's Action Party. Mr. Pereira's resignation leaves a seat open in Aljunied, which has been a WP stronghold and a GRC under the WP since 2011. But the gap he leaves goes beyond that. He led the WP's media team and fielded many of the questions in Parliament. And Ms. Nicole Seah's resignation may have also dented the party's chances of causing an electoral upset in East Coast GRC, which was a close fight in the last election. That is, unless the WP is able to stump up an equally or even more popular candidate than her. The same could very well be said of the PAP for Mr. Tan and Mr. Cheng Li Hui's Marine Parade and Tampines wards, respectively. Will it affect residents' confidence and trust in the party? Bearing in mind that at this point in time, there are actually more scandals on the PAP side because there's that ongoing CPIB, probe with Transport Minister S. Iswaran. But it's not necessarily a disaster for either party. I think, residents that the media spoke to were actually quite divided over whether it matters in the long run. And in the end, let's face it, the party's hardcore supporters will continue to rally behind them.